Ramamurti is a distinguished professor at Northeastern University. He's also the Director of International Business and Strategy. He's joining us now for analysis on the BRICS Summit. The pandemic's been a challenge for every country in the world. It's forced this summit, of course, to be held virtually. India's seen almost 9 million cases. The virus has spread like wildfire in Brazil and Russia as well. Give us your sense of how these countries have weathered the pandemic. Where do they stand, and what has it done to their various economies?
Well, it's dealt a heavy blow to most of these countries. It started out with China, and China has bounced back, but the other countries are still dealing with the ramifications of the virus, which is still continuing to spread in some cases, sometimes at quite high rates. It has had a devastating impact on their economies. The GDP growth rates have all swung into the negative range, some pretty deep. Now, they may bounce back relatively quickly because once the pandemic is out of the way, a lot of the economic activity will tend to come back. But, it's going to take a while, even with the vaccine on the horizons, before they can actually begin to put people back to work.
And how do you see these countries coming together, working together on vaccines or combating the virus in other ways?
Well, they're already cooperating to some extent because each of them has strengths in different areas. Russia has come up with a vaccine. They claim it works very effectively. So has China. And these new vaccines are being tested in sometimes the other BRIC countries. India is a major producer of vaccines. One that has some of the largest vaccine producing and lowest cost producing factories in the world. So they all have a role to play. And if they can cooperate, they can probably all deal with this more effectively.
And when you look at BRICS, you can point to the BRICS Bank, some other accomplishments, but Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi pointing out that this summit, that the BRIC nations are vitally important. They make up about 42% of the world's population and therefore among the main engines of the global economy. As you know, many of them have been sidelined. What does that do to the global economy, and how important are they to actually resuscitating the global economy?
Well, they are quite important, but China is the most important of them because, China's GDP is now more than the sum of the GDPs of the other 4 BRICS nations. So if China bounces back faster, then it does help the global economy more than any of the other economies. And it can also help some of these other economies get back on their feet because China is a large market for some of their products. But, in the long run, it's still probably true that 2/3 or more of the world's GDP growth in the long run has to come from these countries, which are some of the largest populations. India in particular has very large populations. Per capita income still has a long ways to go, lots of headroom for growth. If they can pull their economic policies together and take advantage of the opportunities, then I think India can be an important part of the engine for the global economy.
You're mentioning India. Modi and Xi, of course, meeting virtually at this session, but they were also meeting virtually recently at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Talk to us about these sessions and what they can do to ease some of the tensions between these two countries, because we've seen these Indian and Chinese soldiers involved in these border flare-ups.
Yeah, I think this has been a major setback to the BRICS and also to the India-China relationship in the last year. It builds on some previous episodes, but this one has been particularly serious. And I think a lot remains to be, depends on what happens going forward, if they can actually resolve this and take away some of the tensions. Because, trust is very important in these kinds of relationships. And it really helps if the leaders of the two countries have a chance to try to restore that trust, because sometimes it requires that level of participation to mend fences. But I think it's very important that they attempt to do that because it's very important for the peace if you want to have prosperity. And I think peace is in the interest of all of the countries in the region and in the world.
What do you think is going to be the main takeaway from this summit? I mean, we're talking a lot about the pandemic and not the other P, which is President of the United States. There's likely to be a new president in January. The Trump administration, 4 years of that. Obviously, there's going to be a change in how the U.S. deals with the global environment. How do you see BRICS responding?
Well, I think that the bigger issue that is dividing the BRICS, where they have a common front, I think, with respect to the U.S. and some of the other developed countries, is whether we're going to restore multilateralism, more open trade of the kind we've used to have in the previous decades, and create a place at the table for the large emerging economies, which are represented, say, by the BRICS, so that these global institutions we really need to change with the times